So, hello and welcome back. We are back with Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, which I'm still not seeing really necessarily the horror in this book. I mean, for a book that's considered the very first horror novel, it's not horrifying to me in the way I think of a horror novel. Like, it's more horrifying in the way that Victor treated his creation, or just his hubris in even attempting a creation. But I'm not getting any, like, of the horror elements that I think of in a horror novel. And that could just be my modern person perspective who has read far too many Stephen King books. That might be what it is. But yeah, I'm enjoying this novel. I'm enjoying it a whole lot. It's got some great, like, insight into humanity and everything, and it definitely is proving to me that a lot of things, it's one of those, the more things have changed, the more things seem to just remain the same. But I'm definitely have not been scared by it. Not in the slightest. I've had a lot of sympathy and empathy, but not much in the way of going, things that go bump in the night. But, I mean, we haven't gotten to the scary part yet, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing good. We are going to be finishing volume 2 and beginning volume 3 tonight in our 2 chapters, because somehow Mary Shelley decided that 10 chapters instead of 9 in volume 2. It is what it is. Did I read 3 chapters one night? I have no idea. But anyway, whatever. We are jumping back into the end of volume 2 and the beginning of volume 3 tonight in Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus. The being finished speaking, and fixed his looks upon me in the expectation of a reply. But I was bewildered, perplexed, and unable to arrange my ideas sufficiently to understand the full extent of his proposition. So he continued, "You must create a female for me, with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede." The latter part of his tale had kindled anew in me the anger that had died away while he narrated his peaceful life among the cottagers, and when he said this, I could no longer suppress the rage that burned within me. "I do refuse it," I replied, "and no torture shall ever extort a consent from me. You may render me the most miserable of men, but you shall never make me base in my own eyes. Shall I create another like yourself, whose joint wickedness might desolate the world? Begone! I have answered you. You may torture me, but I will never consent." "You are in the wrong," said the fiend, "and instead of threatening, I am content to reason with you. I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind? You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Remember that, and tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me. You would not call it murder if you could precipitate me on one of these ice rifts and destroy my frame, the work of your own hands. Shall I respect a man when he condemns me? Let him live with me, in the interchange of kindness, and instead of injury, I would bestow every benefit upon him with tears of gratitude at his acceptance. But that cannot be. The human senses are insurmountable barriers. Yet mine shall not be the submission of abject slavery. I will revenge my injuries if I cannot inspire love. I will cause fear. Chiefly towards you, my archenemy, because, my creator, I do swear hatred. Have a care. I will work at your destruction, nor will I finish until I desolate your heart, so that you shall curse the hour of your birth. A rage animated him as he said this. His face was wrinkled into contortions too horrible for human eyes to behold, but soon enough he calmed himself and proceeded. I intend to reason. This passion is detrimental to me, for you do not reflect that you are the cause of it. If any being felt emotions of benevolence to me, I would return them 100 and 100-fold. For that one creature's sake, I would make peace with all mankind. But I now indulge in dreams of bliss that will never be realized. What I ask of you is reasonable and moderate. I demand a creature of another sex, but as hideous as me. The gratification is small, but it is all I can receive, and it will content me. It is true, we will be monsters, cut off from all the world, but on that account we shall be more attached to each other. Our lives will not be happy, but they will be harmless and free from the misery I now feel. Oh, my Creator, make me happy. Let me feel gratitude towards you for one benefit. Let me see that I excite the sympathy of some existing thing. Do not deny me my request. I was moved. I shuddered when I thought of the possible consequences of my consent, but I felt there was some justice to his argument. His tale and the feelings he now expressed proved him to be a creature of fine sensations, and did I not, as his maker, owe him all the portion of happiness that it was in my power to bestow? He saw my change of heart, and he continued, If you consent, neither you nor any other human being shall ever see us again. I will go to the vast wilds of South America. My food is not that of man. I do not destroy the lamb and kid to glut my appetite. Acorns and berries give me enough nourishment. My companion will be of the same nature as myself and will be content on the same fare. We will make our bed out of dried leaves. The sun will shine on us as on man, and will ripen our food. The picture I give you is peaceful and human, and you must feel that you could deny it only in the wantonness of power and cruelty. Pitiless as you have been towards me, I now see compassion in your eyes. Let me seize the favorable moment and persuade you to promise what I so ardently desire. You propose, I said, to fly from the habitations of man, to dwell in those wilds where the beasts of the field will be your only companions. How can you, who long for the love and sympathy of man, persevere in this exile? You will return and again seek their kindness, and you will meet with their destination. Your evil passions will be renewed, and you will then have a companion to help you in your destruction. This may not be. Cease to argue. I cannot consent. How inconsistent are your feelings, said the creature. But a moment ago you were moved by my plea. And why do you again harden your heart to my complaint? I swear to you by the earth which I inhabit, and by you who made me, that with the companion you bestow, I will leave the neighborhood of man and dwell as it may change in the savage places. My evil passions will have left me, for I shall be met with sympathy. My life will flow quietly away, and in my dying moments I will not curse my Maker. His words had a strange effect on me. I had compassion towards him, and sometimes felt a wish to console him, but when I looked at him, when I saw the filthy mass that could move and talk, my heart sickened and my feelings were altered to those of horror and hatred. I tried to stifle these sensations. I thought, since I couldn't sympathize with him, I had no right to withhold from him the small bit of happiness that was in my power to bestow. "You swear," I said, "to be harmless. But have you not already shown a degree of malice that should reasonably make me distrust you? Maybe not even this, that will increase your triumph by giving you a wide scope for your revenge." "What are you talking about?" the creature said. "I must not be trifled with, and I demand an answer. If I have no ties and affections, hatred and vice must be my portion. The love of another will destroy the cause of my crimes, and I will become a thing of whose existence everyone will be ignorant. My vices are the children of forced solitude that I hate. My virtues will arise when I live in communion with an equal. I shall feel the affections of a sensitive being and become linked to the change of existence and events from which I now am excluded." I paused for a while to reflect on everything he had said and the various arguments he had used. I thought of the promise of virtues which he had displayed in the opening of his tale, and the subsequent blight of all kindly feeling by the hatred and scorn which his protectors had shown towards him. His power and threats were not omitted to my calculations. A creature who could exist in the ice caves of glaciers and hide himself from pursuit among the ridges of inaccessible hills was a being possessing facilities that it would be vain to cope with. After a long pause for thought, I concluded that the justice due both to him and my fellow man demanded of me that I should comply with his request. Turning to him, therefore, I said, "I consent to your demand, on your solemn oath to quit Europe forever, and every other place in the neighborhood of man, as soon as I shall deliver into your hands a female who can accompany you into exile." "I swear," he cried, "by the sun and by the blue sky of heaven, and by the fire of love that burns in my heart, if you grant my prayer, while they exist, you will never see me again. Leave your home and commence your labors. I shall watch their progress with anxiety, and fear not but that when you are ready, I will reappear." Upon saying this, he suddenly left me, fearful perhaps of any change to my sentiment. I saw him descend the mountain with greater speed than the flight of an eagle, and quickly lost him among the undulations of the sea of ice. His tale had occupied the whole day, and the sun was upon the verge of the horizon when he left. I knew that I ought to hasten my descent towards the valley, as I should soon be encompassed in darkness, but my heart was heavy, and my steps were slow. The labor of winding among the little paths of the mountain and fixing my feet firmly as I advanced perplexed me, occupied as I was by the emotions which the occurrences of the day had produced. Night was well advanced when I came to the halfway resting place, and I sat myself beside the fountain. The stars shone at intervals, and the clouds passed from over them. The dark pines rose before me, and every here and there a broken tree lay on the ground. It was a scene of wonderful solemnity, and it stirred strange thoughts in me. I wept bitterly, and clasping my hands in agony, I said, "Oh, stars and clouds and winds, ye are all about to mock me. If ye really pity me, crush sensation and memory. Let me become as nothing, but if not, then depart and leave me in darkness." These were wild, miserable thoughts, but I cannot describe to you how the eternal twinkling of the stars weighed upon me, how I listened to every blast of wind as though it were a dull, ugly sorrock on its way to consume me. Morning had dawned before I arrived at the village of Chamoux. I took no rest, but returned immediately to Geneva. Even in my own heart, I could give no expression to my feelings. They weighed on me with a mountain's weight, and their excess destroyed my agony beneath them. Thus I returned home, and entering the house, presented myself to the family. My haggard and wild appearance awoke alarm in them, but I answered no questions, scarce did I speak. I felt as if I were placed under a ban, as if I had no right to claim their sympathy, as if never more might I enjoy companionship with them. Yet even thus, I loved them to adoration, and to save them, I resolved to dedicate myself to this most hated task. The prospect of such an occupation made every other circumstance of my existence pass before me like a dream, and that thought only was to me the only real thing in life. And that is the end of Volume 2. Yeah, I don't like Victor at all. I really don't. Finishing Volume 2, the only thing I can think is what a man-child Victor Frankenstein is. Even the minute the monster finishes his tale, his first thought is me, 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 me. And my sympathies are still lying with the monster. I'm going to get a drink, and then we're going to start Volume 3. All right, let's begin the ending. Volume 3 of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Chapter 1. Day after day, week after week passed away on my return to Geneva, and I could not collect the courage to recommence my work. I feared the vengeance of the disappointed fiend, yet I was unable to overcome my repugnance to the task which was enjoined upon me. I found that I could not compose a female without again devoting several months to profound study and laborious disquisition. I had heard of some discoveries having been made by an English philosopher, the knowledge of which was material to my success, and I sometimes thought about obtaining my father's consent to visit England for this purpose, but I clung to every pretense of delay, and I shrank away from taking the first step in an undertaking whose immediate necessity started to feel less absolute to me. A change had indeed taken place in me. My health, which had before declined, was now much restored, and my spirits, when not clouded by the memory of my unhappy promise, rose with it. My father looked upon this change with pleasure, and he turned his thoughts towards the best method of eradicating the remains of my melancholy, which now and then would return in fits, and with a devouring blackness would overcast the approaching sunlight. At these moments I took refuge in the most perfect solitude. I would pass whole days on the lake alone in my little boat, watching the clouds and listening to the rippling of the waves. silently and listlessly. But fresh air and bright suns almost never failed to restore me to some degree of composure, and upon my return I met the salutations of my friends with a readier smile and a cheerfuller heart. It was after my return from one of these rambles that my father, calling me aside, addressed me thusly: "I am happy to remark, my dear son, that you have resumed your formal pleasures, and you seem to be returning to yourself, and yet you are still unhappy, and still avoid our society. For some time I was lost in thought as to the cause of this, but yesterday an idea struck me, and if it is well founded, I conjure you to think upon it. Reserve on such a point would be not only useless, but would draw misery upon us all." I trembled at his words, and my father continued: "I confess, my son, that I have always looked forward to your marriage to our dear Elizabeth as the tie of our domestic comfort and the hope of my declining years. You were attached to each other from your earliest infancy. You studied together and appeared in disposition and taste entirely suited. But so blind is the experience of man that what I conceived to be the best assistance to my plan may have entirely destroyed it. Perhaps you look upon her as a sister, without any wish that she may become your wife. Nay, you may have met with another whom you love, and considering yourself as bound in honor to Elizabeth, this struggle might occasion the misery which you appear to be feeling." "No, my dear father," I said. "Reassure yourself. I love my cousin tenderly and sincerely. I have never seen a woman who excited the way Elizabeth does my warmest admiration and affection. My future hopes and my prospects are entirely bound up in the expectation of our union." "Ah, dear Victor," said my father, "this gives me more pleasure than I have for a long time experienced. If you feel this, we will assuredly be happy. However, present events may cast a gloom over us, but it is this gloom which appears to have taken such a strong hold of your mind that I wish to dissipate. Tell me, do you object to an immediate solemnization of the marriage? We have been unfortunate, and recent events have drawn from us everyday tranquility that I would like to enjoy, befitting my years and my infirmities. You are younger, yet I do not suppose, possessed as you are of a competent fortune, that early marriage would interfere with any of your plans of honor and utility that you might have already made. Do not suppose, however, that I want to dictate your happiness to you, or that a delay on your part would cause me any serious uneasiness. Interpret my words, my son, and answer me." I listened to my father in silence, and remained for some time incapable of a reply. I revolved rapidly in my mind a magnitude of thoughts, and endeavored to arrive at some conclusion, but, alas, to me, the idea of an immediate union with my Elizabeth was one of horror and dismay. I was bound by a solemn promise which I had not yet fulfilled, and I dared not break it, or, if I did break it, what misery might not impend over me and my family? Could I enter into a festival with this weight hanging round my neck, bowing me to the ground? I must perform my engagement, and let the monster leave with his mate before I allowed myself to enjoy the delight of a union which I expected to have peace from. I remembered also the necessity imposed on me of either journeying to England or entering into a long correspondence with the philosophers from that country, whose knowledge and discoveries were of indispensable use to me in my undertaking. The latter method of obtaining the desired intelligence was unsatisfactory. Besides, I had an insurmountable aversion to the idea of engaging myself in my loathsome work in my father's home, while also in habit of formal speaking with the ones that I loved. I knew that 1,000 fearful accidents might occur, the slightest of which would disclose a tale to thrill all connected to me with horror. I was aware also that I should often lose all self command and all capacity of hiding the harrowing sensations that would possess me during the progress of my unearthly occupations. No, I must absent from all that I loved while I was employed in this. Once begun, it would be quickly achieved, and I might be restored to my family in peace and happiness. Once the promise was fulfilled, the monster would depart forever, or so my fond fancy imagined. Perhaps some accident might meanwhile occur and destroy him, and thus put an end to my sorrows forever. These feelings directed my answer to my father. I expressed a wish to visit England, but concealing the true reasons of this request, I clothed my desire under a guise which excited no suspicion. Well, I urged my desire with an eagerness that induced my father to comply with it. After so long a period of absorbing melancholy that almost resembled madness in its intensity and effects, my father was glad to find that I was capable of taking pleasure in the idea of a journey, and he hoped that change of scenery and a variation of amusement would, before I returned, restore me entirely to myself. The duration of this absence was left to my own choice. A few months, or at most a year, was the period contemplated. One paternal, kind precaution he had taken to ensure my having a companion. Without previously communicating to me, he had, along with Elizabeth, arranged that Clerval should join me at Starsbar. This interfered with the solitude that I coveted for the prosecution of my task, yet at the commencement of my journey, the presence of my friend could in no way become an impediment, and truly I rejoiced that thus I should be saved many hours of lonely, maddening reflection. Nay, Henry might stand between me and the intrusion of the monster. If I were alone, would he not at times force his abhorrent presence upon me, to remind me of my task, or just to contemplate the progress of it? So to England, therefore, was I bound, and it was understood that my union with Elizabeth would take place immediately on my return. My father's age rendered him averse to delaying it. For me, there was one reward I promised myself from my detested work, one consolation for my unparalleled suffering, and it was the prospect of that day when, enfranchised away from this miserable slavery, I would claim Elizabeth, forget all of the past in my union with her. I now made the arrangements for my journey, but one feeling haunted me, which filled me with fear and agitation. During my absence, I should leave my friends unconscious of the existence of their enemy? Should I leave them unprotected from his attacks, exasperated as he might be with my departure? But no, he had promised to follow me wherever I might go, and would he not accompany me to England? This was a dreadful idea in itself, but also soothing insomuch as it would suppose the safety of my friends. I was agonized with the idea of the possibility that the reverse of this might happen. But through the whole period during which I was the slave of this creature, I allowed myself to be governed by the impulses of the moment, and my present sensations strongly intimated that the fiend would follow me, and thusly exempt my family from the danger of him. It was in the latter half of September that I again quit my native country. My journey had been my own suggestion, and Elizabeth therefore acquiesced, but she was filled with disquiet at the idea of my suffering away from her. It had been her care which had provided me a companion in Clerval, and yet a man is blind to 1,000 minute circumstances which call forth a woman's attention. She longed to bid me to hasten my return. 1,000 conflicting emotions rendered her mute as she bade me a tearful and silent farewell. I threw myself into the carriage that was to take me away, hardly knowing where I was going and careless of what was passing. I remembered only, and it was with a bitter anguish that I reflected on it, to order my chemical instruments packed to go with me. Filled with dreary imagination, I passed through many beautiful, majestic scenes, but my eyes did not see them. I could only think of the bane of my travels and the work which was to occupy me while they were still enduring. After some days spent in listless indolence, during which I traversed leagues, I arrived at Starsborough, where I waited 2 days for Clerval. He came. Alas, how great was the contrast between us! He was alive to every new scene, joyful when he saw the beauties of the setting sun, and more happy when he saw it rise and recommence a new day. He pointed out to me the shifting colors of the landscape and the appearances of the sky. "This is what it is to live," he said. "Now I enjoy existence. But you, my dear Frankenstein, why are you desponding and sorrowful?" In truth, I was occupied by gloomy thoughts, and neither saw the descent of the evening star or the golden sunrise reflected in the Rhine. And you, my friend, would be far more amused by the journey of Clerval, who observed the scenery with an eye of feasting and delight. You would enjoy that so much more than listening to my reflections. I, a miserable wretch, haunted by a curse that shut up every avenue to my ever enjoying anything. We had agreed to descend the Rhine in a boat from Starsborough to Rotterdam, where we might take shipping for London. During this voyage, we passed many willowy islands and saw several beautiful towns. We stayed a day at Mannheim, and on the 5th from our departure of Starsborough, arrived at Meissen. The course of the Rhine below Meissen becomes much more picturesque. The river descends rapidly, and winds between the hills, not high but steep, are of a beautiful form. We saw many ruined castles standing on the edges of precipices, surrounded by black woods, high and inaccessible. This part of the Rhine, indeed, presents a singularly variegated landscape. In one spot, you view rugged hills, ruined castles, overlooking tremendous precipices, with the dark Rhine rushing beneath it all. And then upon the sudden turn of a promontory, you see flourishing vineyards with green sloping banks and a meandering river through a populous town. We traveled at the time of the vintage, and we heard the song of the laborers as we glided down the stream. Even I, depressed in mind and spirits continually agitated by gloomy feelings, even I was pleased. I lay at the bottom of the boat, and as I gazed up upon the cloudless blue sky, I seemed to drink in a tranquility which I had long been a stranger to. And if these were my sensations, who can describe those of Henry? He felt as if he had been transported into fairyland and enjoyed a happiness seldom seen by man. I have seen, he said, the most beautiful scenes of my own country. I have visited the lakes of Lucerne and the Uri, where the snowy mountains descend almost perpendicularly to the water, casting black shadows which would cause a gloomy and mournful appearance if it were not for the most verdant islands that relieve the eye with their appearance. I have seen this lake agitated by a tempest, when the wind tore up whirlwinds of water and gave you an idea of what the waterspout must be on the great ocean. I've seen the waves dash with fury the base of the mountains, where the priest and his mistress were overwhelmed by an avalanche, and where their dying voices are still said to be heard amongst the passes of the nightly wind. I've seen the mountains of La Valonnais and the Pays de Vendée, but this country, Victor, it pleases me more than all those wonders. The mountains of Switzerland are more majestic and strange, but there's a charm in the banks of this divine river that I have never seen equaled. Look at that castle which overhangs the precipice, and that one also on the island, almost concealed amongst the foliage of those lovely trees. And look now at that group of laborers coming from amongst their vines, and look at that village half hidden in the recess of the mountain. Oh, surely the spirit that inhabits and guards this place has a soul more in harmony with man than those who pile the glacier or retire to the inaccessible peaks of the mountains of our country. Clerval, my beloved friend, even now it delights me to recall your words and to dwell on the praise of which you are so eminently deserving. He was a being formed in the very poetry of nature. His wild, enthusiastic imagination was chastened by the sensibility of his heart. His soul overflowed with ardent affections, and his friendship was that of a devoted and wonderful nature that the worldly minded teach us to look for only in our imaginations. But even human sympathies were not sufficient to satisfy his eager mind. The scenery of external nature, which others regard only with admiration, he loved with such ardor. The sounding cataract haunted him like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms, were then to him an appetite, a feeling, and a love that has no need of a remoter charm, but by thought supplied, or any interest unborrowed from the eye. Poetry. And where does he now exist? In this gently and loving being, is he lost forever? Has this mind, so replete with ideas, imaginations, both fanciful and magnificent, which formed a world whose existence depended on the life of his creator, is this mind gone? Does it now only exist in my memory? No. It is not thus. Your form so divinely wrought and becalming and beaming with beauty, it might have decayed, but your spirit still consoles your unhappiest friend. Pardon this rush of sorrow. These ineffectual words are but a slight tribute to the unexampled worth of my friend Henry. They do soothe my heart, though, as it overflows with the anguish which his remembrance creates. I'll go on with my tale. Beyond Cologne, we descended to the plains of Holland, and we resolved to post the remainder of the way, for the wind was contrary, and the stream of the river was far too gentle to aid us. Our journeys here lost the interest arriving from the beautiful scenery, but we made it in a few days at Rotterdam, where we proceeded by sea to England. It was on a clear morning in the latter days of December that I first saw the white cliffs of Britain. The banks of the Thames presented a new scene. They were flat but fertile, and almost every town was marked by the remembrance of some story. We saw Tilbury Fort and remembered the Spanish Armada, Gravesend, Woolwich, and Greenwich, places which I had heard of even in my own country. Soon enough, we saw the numerous steeples of London, St. Paul towering above us all, and the Tower, the famous tower of English history. And that is the end of chapter 1. And just by a little bit of foreshadowing from old Victor, I don't think that his friend Henry is among the living anymore. I wonder what happens. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And speaking of waiting and seeing, I will be back with chapters 3 and 4 on Saturday night. I take my Friday nights off so that I can do my live stream and give myself just a kind of day of just rest. And maybe, who knows, maybe I'll actually get a little bit ahead. I say that every week, and it almost never happens, but, fingers crossed, maybe it will this time. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile, and I will see you next time.